Emphasize the individual federal employees are mostly not bad people, actually, because most human beings are not bad people. To the contrary, most people who are federal employees are doing what they do because they believe they're serving their country, and I respect that. I'm hopeful it's going to be even good for many of the individuals who may make a transition from government service back to the private sector.
That was Vivek Ramaswamy, who is part of the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency with Elon Musk and has pushed for making mass cuts to the federal workforce, insisting those very cuts will be beneficial to government workers. Joining us now, former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner.
Steve, let's just cut straight to this. And I know you're going to go through these charts, but this is something that when I hear these two guys talking about how they're going to cut $2 trillion from the budget, it's a joke. And it's a joke because this is something you and I have been obsessed about for a very long time, the national debt, getting the deficit under control. And I just looking at your first chart here, I mean, people need to understand Social Security and Medicare make up about 50% of what the government spends. You add defense and veterans benefits, that's another 20%. So you're up to 70%. You then add debt and how much it costs to service that debt. That's another 10%. So, Steve, before they even start talking about cutting these so-called federal employees that are bankrupting us, the United States government has already spent 80% of its budget on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, vets, defense, and interest on the debt. So I love some of these other numbers. And again, forgive me for like killing Hamlet in the first act here. But, let's cut law enforcement. That's 1% of the budget. Let's cut sciences and medical research. We spend too much on that, they may be saying. 1% of the budget. Ag, 1% of the budget. Transportation, those pork barrel projects, it's going to bankrupt us. It's only 2% of the budget. Again, I will actually let you explain this far better than I am right now. But this is a scam unless they're going to slash Social Security and Medicare and and Veterans Affairs. They're never going to get to $2 trillion, so they need to just stop pretending.
You know, Joe, I feel like Vanna White. I'm just turning letters up here, and you're actually Pat Sajak telling people how it is.
It makes me so mad. But it's so disingenuous.
I'm happy to be your letter guy. But you said it exactly right, Joe. This is a completely disingenuous, unrealistic, ridiculous idea for the reasons you all said, that only 25% of the budget can really be cut. And even that, you rattled off a lot of programs that most Americans would say are really important to them. And so you're trying to cut, I can do a little bit of math. You're trying to cut $2 trillion, but you've only got $1.5 trillion of stuff that you can cut, and that would be cutting all of it. Now, I would say Trump has intimated about cutting some money from Medicaid. We're going to talk right over here about veterans, where there's some stuff on the chopping block. But what Musk and Ramaswamy have done as a first approximation is they've identified about $500 billion of spending that through a complicated legislative quirk, which I'm not going to get into, they think they can actually cut without Congress. But let's just give it as an example of the things they would like to cut. Veterans health care, $119 billion. Eliminate health care for veterans. We're going to talk about the impact of all this stuff in a second. NIH, $47 billion. Pell Grants for education, $22 billion. Head Start, we all know what that is, $12 billion. The FBI, maybe they'd actually like to cut that, $11 billion. These, by the way, would zero all this stuff out. These are not just trims. This is eliminating this stuff. Federal prisons, the SEC, and so forth. And all of that adds up to $516 billion. And so there's still a long way from their $2 trillion target, even if they got all this stuff and even if people accepted this. So, yes, Joe, your opening premise is right. It is ridiculous.
So Musk and Ramaswamy are heading to the Hill today to start pitching these cuts. We should note, though, by the time they arrive late afternoon, the Senate will have gone home by then. So they're still learning on the job, I suppose. Steve, you mentioned the VA and NIH are targets here. Talk to us about those cuts, what they'd mean.
Yeah, I just want to give these as examples of what how heavy the political lift would be to try to get this done. You're talking about 6.2 million veterans who are receiving health care from the Veterans Administration. And that number, this is a 2021 number, the most recent one we have, but that number is only going to grow. For example, they passed the PACT Act, which is to protect veterans who are hurt in burn pits and things like that. That passed by an overwhelming bipartisan consensus. So imagine the idea you go back then, a year or two later, and you say, I know you passed this thing by a bipartisan consensus, now we want to eliminate it. It just doesn't stand the test of reality. Then you talk about the NIH. The NIH is a truly great organization. It funds basic research that the private sector won't fund because there's not obvious commercial use for it. Put aside lung cancer, which had a lot to do with smoking, taking up smoking, cessation of smoking. But the NIH's impact, and it's not just the NIH, but they played a big role in all these different cancers that have come down, down, down in terms of incidence, deaths from these cancers, from colon and rectum, breast, prostate, lung cancer we talked about, cervix and stomach. All these cancers have come down, and you have the NIH to thank for a lot of it.